Okay, welcome everyone to the Healthy Empath podcast. Today I am joined by my friend Damian Orvananos. He is a therapist. He's a friend of mine. I've worked with him in a few different ways. His therapy and healing work, and also doing some kung fu and qigong with him. And he's studied um, a little bit of everything. It seems like when it comes to spirituality and healing and all that kind of stuff, and is very well versed in all these different topics. So I'm excited to have him on here today and just see how he got into all this and share some of that knowledge with us. So Damien, again, welcome for being here. And would you mind giving us your professional bio? And after that, just getting into more of your kind of like healing journey or the healer's journey, whatever you want to share from that aspect as well.
Sure, Mike. Thanks for having me on your show. It's an honor to be here. Um, sure, for sure. My professional background, I studied psychology in Sussex University in the UK, and then I went on to do a master's degree in holistic science and philosophy, also in England. And then I went into professional trainings in psychotherapy, in transpersonal, integral body psychotherapy in Mexico City. And over the the last 3 years, I am currently undergoing also a professional certification in something called ontogonic body-mind therapy, which is a combination of transpersonal therapy and spirituality integrated into a very beautiful uh, gestalt. That's for my professional, like academic background. But since I was 16, I went into the, spiritual or personal journey, spiritual path. I underwent a very deep transformation that initially lasted 4 years. I studied Qigong, psychotherapy, shamanism, and specifically Tibetan Tantric Buddhism by Rayana. And that really went deep into an unexplored world for me, but it felt so at home. I had so many transformative experiences doing my own healing work of trauma of my birth. I was born premature at 6.5 months. So I had a very traumatic birth. I spent more than a few weeks in an incubator, and then I had complications all over my first year. So that later on in my early adolescence, that drove me to therapy because I was starting to become very inclined to addiction. So that took me to therapy right away, and I just unpacked all that trauma the approach that I did, that I underwent myself, and later I developed professionally a career out of, was something that used to be called body psychotherapy. Now, recently, it's been called somatic psychotherapy, but it's not the same thing. And basically, what it entails is bringing your experience into the body, healing in the body, inside the body, in the somatic experience, and then through there, the entire spectrum of consciousness, the mental sphere, the emotional sphere, the symbolic sphere, the transpersonal sphere, existential sphere, everything comes into the body. And the goal is to allow a flow, conscious flow of life force, ki, prana, vitality, however you want to call it, consciously in the body to come to a state of health. So I kind of started in my own process when I was a teenager, first for the first 4 years. Then I went on to college and university and masters. And then now I'm kind of coming full circle into professional training. And in all this kind of 25 years of investigation of myself, I made a career out of it. I went to university. But fantastically, it's kind of all coming full circle back to the idea that the academic work or professional training, quote unquote, in my view, is not so important as personal experience.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I remembered parts of that story actually, but I didn't realize 6.5 months. Like that's really really early. Especially here with Susie do, and a week or so. I can imagine she was baby was born months ago. Like that's wow.
Yeah.
And I'm actually just very fascinated with birth trauma in general, because if you do come full term and just with the westernized hospitals and just the way the kind of the spirit has been taken from birth, it becomes itself very traumatic. So before I go into some of the other questions I had about your story, can you share a little bit more about that birth trauma and from your experience, and then also maybe other people you work with, what's happening to the baby on this body psychosomatic level when these things are happening?
Wow, this is a huge question. Like we could speak for hours about this topic only, but basically there is a lot of evidence now to support the idea that consciousness exists in the fetus before birth, of course, especially during the last trimester. So there is already consciousness happening, and the symbolic ritual of being born, the baby, if it's a full-term birth and it's a natural birth, the baby has to make a big effort to be born. It's suddenly pressure becomes unbearable, and the baby has to use all his or her resources to push and come out. So it's the first major archetypal death of the baby. Like you have like a death and rebirth. It's not just like a birth in the sense that it's like, okay, start, we begin. When you come out, life begins. Life began before being born, and the process of birth is a death of all the known experience of the baby. And then you have to kind of die, because it's a painful, frightening, terrifying experience. And then you come out the other side, and if you manage to have a normal let's say natural birth, you as a human being will acquire a lot of confidence and trust in your own process of being able to overcome big obstacles, existential obstacles, so to speak. If you don't have a natural birth, as in if you're born through a C-section, or if you're born premature, if there is fetal suffering or maternal suffering, these are all added layers of trauma that sooner or later the person will have to deal with in therapy, one way or another. No? And I'm saying therapy in a very broad sense, because many things can become therapeutic.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that word therapy future as we go on. But I mean, just I've had chills the entire time you've been explaining this.
There is if you want to go back to the beginning of who started writing about this stuff, his name was Otto Rank, R-A-N-K. He was one of actually Freud's disciples. And this guy, he wrote a book which is also actually called The Trauma of Birth. So he's the main beginner. And then Stanislav Grof has done a lot of research into birth with his holotropic breathing things, this called model. So he made like this kind of thing he called perinatal matrices, that he actually maps the stages of development in the fetus. And so that's a really good way to go about it. If you're interested in that, that's where I would go. So yeah, so my story, I pretty much, I remember my birth. I through hypnosis and therapy and psychedelics, I started kind of to put together the picture of remembering my birth. And so I remember the original moment, the trauma, the feelings. My mother almost died giving birth, so there was a lot of fear there. And that created a wound for my life later to relating with women and females in general. Yeah, it was part of my karma, I guess you could say. I had to learn to work through.
Yeah, wow. And so a couple questions. Well, one of them is, this idea is just kind of fascinating that our birth is also like that first death, right? And just that kind of cycle that we're always in. And most people don't think of that as you're being born is also the first kind of type of death experience too, right? Just going from this known to the unknown. You're in this safe, well, it might not always be safe if the mother's hyper stressed and not in a safe environment, but typically you're in this just safe little bubble of darkness and warmth and being taken care of and floating around, and then all of a sudden you have to squeeze out there, and then being born into right? The unknown. Who knows what is going to happen? I first learned about this in a session with someone doing some healing work, and she, going into her body and her feeling just kind of depressed and not kind of a lack of that zest for life, and then tuned into it, and the memories that came up was being born with her umbilical cord around her neck and coming out blue, and then so there was a wound or a trauma there that she was 30 something now and still had this kind of like not really wanting to live, that part of her that existed that didn't really want to, and that was connected to that. So that's when I first kind of really learned about that and was fascinated. And then so another question is, so when you were doing that healing and then having to do all that, like, was that a lot to do with the feminine and like the mother wound and reconnecting to like Mother Earth and allowing yourself to be like cared for or loved on this earth? Because that was a lot of some of the work that I was doing in Mexico the second time around with you, and when I was going through that crazy transformation when I was that you were witnessing on a weekly basis. So yeah, anyway, I don't know if I got the question out there, but yeah, what did you learn from that? Did you have to reconnect with the mother, with the divine feminine, like, or safety? How did that come about?
Yeah, I guess the idea of the archetypal figure of feminine and masculine is always present in us. And birth is the first one, because the mother, physical mother, and then being born into the world. Ideally, the world should become your mother when you are born. In this moment, you should come to a point where you feel accepted and feel safe. And this contact with the external mother, when your mother brings you into her breast. So there is this kind of entire archetypal experience. But in my personal experience, what happened was I was terrified, basically, because death was looming. It was there. I wasn't ready, and so I had this very, very deep insecurity. Deep insecurity. I was a very insecure child. I was a very insecure kid, and my relationship with women and the feminine in general was very distant at best, because I had this belief deep down in my core that I had almost killed my mom because of me. She died, when I was born. So I had this deep thing that I had to work through in therapy, and still to this day, I can see some stuff in my relationships with women. Thank God, not so much. I think I have more or less healthy relationships now. But what happened? This insecurity, Mike. This is why I went into martial arts, because I needed to become grounded in my body and come into into contact with the earth and to my body. And I had a very, very deep therapeutic session, which is actually the time where I decided that this is what I wanted to do in my life. I basically connected with the primal fear, terror of death, and I pretty much I lost my mind. I became crazy, but it lasted momentarily for a few minutes. And then when I came about, I was running in a field in Spain. I did this therapy in Spain. We were in the room working, shouting, doing body therapy. And suddenly I connected with the fear. And my teacher came into my ear, and he created this very, very terrified shriek, into my ear. He did it. And I just connected with this explosion of terror. And I was lost. Boop. I remember and then when I came back, and my consciousness came back from this open space of empty love, boom, I was running in the field, like a couple 100 yards. My body just sprung up and left the room, and my teacher was running behind me, kind of catching up. And for the first time in my life, I collapsed. I collapsed, and I felt the ground on my feet. We were in Galicia, in this beautiful part of Spain, And for the first time in my life, I felt welcome by the earth, by Gaia, I belong in this planet. And I just cried. I lied down on the ground, and I was like just muddy, and it was rainy, and I just loved it. And so my teacher came, and I just saw his head, I was lying down. He said, yeah. And he just looked at me, and he said, okay, when you finish, you just come back in the group. Okay. But I felt connected to the mother for the first time in my life, and from then on, I literally have had an easier time being in my body, embodied in my experience. So yeah, the trauma of birth needs to be healed. And let me just say, there is a fantastic therapy. If you guys are interested in any of this type of work, which I think we should all do, it's called either rebirthing, or the original was called the primal scream by this guy called Arthur Janov. And he still does, they still run his workshops, and they're fantastic. And so
I do
any type of
remember you telling
breathing
me about that.
therapy, re-breath work, a lot of new breath work modalities that are popping up, they take you to that level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do remember you sharing a couple of those when we talked about that. Yeah, when last winter, and I also shared my experience with the Temescal, and when the Mother Earth it opened up and I saw so clearly I was in the womb. She just said to me, what kind of world do you want to be born back into? I was like, oh my gosh. And like when after it, I did feel like a baby that just like came out of the womb, right? I was like, weak, hardly like move, and just like a little baby deer or something. But yeah, I love your stories. This is really what I want a large emphasis of this podcast to be about, is these healing stories, because I love hearing them. It just like lights my whole body up, and whenever somebody has the capacity to share them like you do, like to me that's the sign of somebody who is doing the work, right? They've been in it. Yeah, you read a lot of books, you studied with a lot of people, but you most importantly have been in your own healing experience, and that's where your wisdom comes from. So those are the kinds of people that I want on this show and that I want to talk to. And one more last note about the birthing experience. So for this next baby, Bodhi, we're planning, we're doing a home birth. It's just going to be like, a midwife, obviously, well, me, Susie, my mom, and then one other person who is going to be there kind of playing multiple roles in terms of being able to support medically, but then also more, energetically and shamanically, if you will. She's not shaman or anything, but anyway, that's how we have it set up. And I've recently been doing some kind of birth trauma healing, and about the things that my primary wounds. It wasn't just the birth itself, that's part of it, but kind of like the medical interventions afterwards. Being a very highly sensitive soul, that left a very dramatic impact on me. And so I was just recently doing healing experiences around this and reclaiming the innocence and reclaiming my manhood and adulthood. And so yeah, I'm just imagining now, like I'm gonna have my drum and my flute, and we're gonna have this like ceremony when he's born, and I just want to do anything possible to make it the most safe and supportive, loving environment. Just welcome here. And I wrote that down. That was incredible. And he said, when you're born, now the world becomes your mother. Like that's how, of course, you actually go to your physical mother, but then there's this spiritual mother too. And so that really, really stuck out to me. So do you have have you heard anything about like what is an optimal birth look like? And you mentioned too, as like it seems like people who have the most natural birth are going to be a little more inherently resilient. So yeah, I just want to make sure for the best experience possible.
Well, if we talk about it in terms of archetypes, you have the masculine, the feminine, which are the main ones, and of course the physical mother is the main archetype, which is life, which we could call Shakti or power. The father is also crucial, and the role of the father or Shiva or consciousness, the masculine side, is present in the birth of a baby always. And I think the role is to hold space, literally to hold the space for us men. I think once and for all is to realize that women are better made. They are superior beings, biologically, spiritually, energetically, and our role is to hold them, to love them, to to be thankful that they choose to love us, and to hold the space. So being able to hold the space for her and the baby is a crucial role, because I think what can happen during birth for a woman, it is such a powerful, or it can be such a powerful experience in terms of the hormone cascade, the neurotransmitter release, adrenaline levels, dopamine levels, oxytocin levels, serotonin. It's just crazy what goes on for a woman. Literally, the entire pelvis opens, and that means that all the lower chakras, the dantian, everything opens. There is a flow of love coming in from the earth to her, because even though she's pushing, this is the moment in a woman's life where she becomes one with the world, because she's giving life. So traditionally it's called in Spanish, it's giving birth. One of the, we say dar a luz, which means giving light, or is literally a possibility for the woman to become liberated
Tararus.
spiritually. It's like a chance for liberation, really. Usually human beings, we have a shot at liberation when we die. Is when we have the biggest opportunity to come into our Buddha nature, or true nature. And the techniques for this are basically the Tibetan techniques of Powa and consciousness transference, etc. The Tibetans are the masters of dying, but in birth, women have this chance. Of course, men, we don't have this opportunity. But as a woman, the woman can go into this state of total surrender, total loss of control through love, and just because it's the ultimate expression of love, the ultimate sacrifice. And if she just surrenders to the experience and opens up to it, the level of chemical processes, kundalini awakening, of chakra activation, like the whole structures of her soul, they will become active. And if the baby is born into that, the electrical, neuronal field, emotional field, soul experience of the baby's consciousness will experience that consciously as they're coming into the world. So the more love, the more release, the more surrender you guys are able to provide in this moment, the baby will have a better chance at gaining his liberation later in life. I imagine you and Susie know, like the natural birth is like a climbing up a staircase. Slowly, she will go ascending into different levels of consciousness and enjoyment and bliss and pain and all this. But gradually, she will climb into more climax or climatic experiences of consciousness, more integrated, more and more integrated, more and more and more open, until she will have to just lose herself. If she does this, what the stories I have been told is that the women, they come into this point of non-duality. They reach the non-dual consciousness and light, what the Tibetans call the clear light, which is our true nature, or Rigpa. And if that is a place, if she's holding this space and the baby comes there, you have a shot at having a little Buddha in your family. No?
That's magical. Yeah. And I've been feeling this right when I was doing the work I was doing, and reconnecting to my innocence. The birth of this baby really felt connected to that, just symbolic of, and also just an action-oriented way for me to reclaim my innocence through the honoring of his. Sorry, Lucan, number one. But no, Lucan turned out pretty darn amazing. But there was the birth did turn a bit traumatic, and then did have to go to a hospital. So we'll see what happens here. And I think the importance of doing this kind of like healing work to reconnect with your body and safety, and the mother for the woman before birth, would probably increase the chances of having a birth more like that. But also, just so all the mothers don't feel bad, this is something that you are not in control of. The baby a lot of times has another directive. You have this beautiful plan, you're gonna do a natural home birth, you're gonna do this and that. Well, that soul might want something otherwise that your soul agreed to. So just let go and surrender. Either way. That's great stuff. I love it. I want this episode to be live to share it with Suze and everyone. So I'm probably gonna do that soon. So moving on though, I want to talk about trauma and therapy in general. So can you talk, what to you, what is trauma, and then also maybe compare to a classical definition or whatever you learned in your schooling, and give us a little overview of what trauma is. It's become so popular now. We talk about it all the time, trauma work, and all these people wwho aren't licensed therapists, I guess like myself, are doing trauma work, and it's just, yeah, what's going on here?
Yeah. I guess in very simple terms, the one way to describe health is to say that the health is contact, and loss of contact is not healthy. So trauma would be loss of contact. Anything you do that prevents you from making contact, connecting with your body, with your emotions, with the moment. And ultimately, the trauma we want to heal is the trauma that made us separate from our true nature, from our true self. That was the original trauma, or you can say the original sin, or the in Dzogchen Tibetan terms they call it marikpa, which is the separation from our conscious, our true nature. So it's like a division, a dissociation, separation. So why does this happen when organism is experiencing reality, and reality has too much, is like an overload? There is either too much of a stimulus in life, like a loud noise, or I don't know, sound. Immediately your body will separate from this separation. And if the stimulus is too much, that is constant over time, or if it's an ambiguous message that you don't understand, like somebody tells you they love you, but then they hit you, and then they love you, and then they hit you, it's like confusing. In order to maintain integrity, you separate yourself, you divide your experience, and then you create an unconscious part and a conscious part. And in this world, in this planet we live in, every human being, because of the way the planet works, which is not very healthy, we have to create this separation. Socially, we are invited or indoctrinated to do this. It's called having a personality. And so trauma is part of everybody. We all, every person, every walking, living being is traumatized in this way. And it's a separation of who we are. And so, like, the way to heal is to accept and to embrace the experience, because the experience is who we are. We just denied it because it was too painful to feel, to observe. Maybe you have seen Lucan sometimes in doing things in his life. Suddenly there might be something that he doesn't understand, or something that scares him or catches him off guard. And the little boys or girls, they will freeze for a second. They kind of freeze. They don't know what to do, and then they just continue. They just keep going, like if nothing happened. You can say, okay, there a trauma was created. There was a separation that he didn't understand. He's present, he's here and now. He's like, I don't know how to make sense of this. But then the here and now just continues. And a little bit of his consciousness got separated and got stuck somewhere in the body.
Like yesterday when the at the playground, the he wanted to play with these girls, and then the mother wouldn't let them, and he was so confused and so sad, and just didn't want to play with anyone for the rest of the day. He's only 2.5,
for example. And that's a big thing for him. Like, why is the world so mean? But if he's allowed to express the sadness and accept the sadness and be sad, then there's no trauma, because he's feeling his experience. But if he were to be taught, I know it's not your case, but if he were to be taught, no, you don't have to cry, boys don't cry, you have to be, toughen up, whatever, bullshit. No? Then trauma happens, because he's not allowed, he's denied his experience. So we're all traumatized in this way. And the way to heal, paradoxically, is to re-experience the trauma. We have to relive the trauma. This is what shadow work is about. This is what trauma work is about. This is what, somehow, in some way, you have to go through the trauma again, but this time accept it. And and say, okay, yeah, this fear is mine, this terror is mine, guilt, whatever, shame. I accept it, and then it no longer controls me, it no longer drives me, it no longer has any power because it's already mine. So this is the essential, I think, point of trauma work, of shadow work, of psychedelic therapy, etc.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. I like it. And something that recently came up for me that I was sharing about trauma is this concept of soul trauma, and how, anything that you are doing that is incongruent with your soul is a form of trauma. And I like your explanation of the loss of contact. I hadn't heard it put like that. And so, yeah, anytime we want to express ourselves as, a children, right? Something resonates with our soul and we want to express that and we're denied that. That's a trauma. And then, all these soul trauma things. So I really enjoy that explanation. And then, so therapy too, there's so many different kinds of therapy that can mean a lot of different things. So how do you define therapy? Because a lot of people in the West, they think that means sitting, doing like talk therapy with a psychotherapist, and that's not what that word means. So what's your take on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for giving me a chance to explain that, because I think it's very necessary. Therapy comes originally from the Greek word, and therapy was also a type of payan, a type of song. But the therapists were like a group of healers that would be very much similar to a shaman, a mediator between the gods and the men, women, and people. And so therapists, their job was to bring together the spiritual and the profane, the ethereal and the physical, any duality in bring together. So again, we're talking about contact, about integration. In my view, following my teacher's way of seeing things, I think therapy should be, the more integral it is, the more broad it is, the better. So therapy should integrate the mind, but also the emotions, but also the body, but also the symbolic, oniric dream world, but also the energetic, spiritual aspect, but also the existential, working with the ancestry. All the more holistic or integral an approach is, I think the better the therapy. So therapy is any discipline, any personal endeavor that reconnects you. And I think psychology is terribly overrated as a therapeutic tool, because, well, in short, psychology today is under a very, very weird idea that it has to be scientific, and to be scientific needs to be objective, and it's a oxymoron. It's a stupid idea that the mind and the consciousness has no physicality, so you cannot. So in psychology, they just throw that away, all that. So I think therapy today, you should seek for it in not in academic circles so much as in professional private institutions. There are a lot of therapies, a lot of psychotherapies, and not all of them work. So it's a bit of a mess, this whole globalization of spirituality and alternative holistic new age offers. There's so much that it's easy to get lost. That's a tough question, but ideally look for someone who has an academic background, but also has a personal experience, professional training in private institutions. I think these are going to be the best therapists.
Yeah. I think you did a great job of explaining all that, and even just like with the words trauma and therapy, and just in terms of simplicity. And I mean, I love this, right? Like the loss of contact or separation. All right. So what is the opposite of what's therapy? Bringing it together, anything that reconnects you, the reintegration. And that's, what what I experience on, you know, my sessions with people, and that's really what's just happening. I mean, when I explain it to people or tell them, I was like, I'm just helping you experience yourself. That's really all I'm doing. And yeah, and I worked with you, and that's pretty much what was happening there. It's just, okay, yeah, how can we offer tools or guidance for you to go deeper into your own experience? And so now you have a background in, well, yeah, a lot of different stuff, right? You mentioned studying these different arts and philosophies, and right, you do martial arts, and yeah, the tantra and all that stuff. So can you touch on this kind of how to live a healthy life? You know, like what brought you to all these? How do you live this like healthy, balanced life? You know, with the mind, body, spirit, using the practices that you've learned from these different traditions.
His name is Carlos de Leon, and he has a fantastic website you can check out. It's called ontogony.com, and he offers both courses in English and Spanish. So yeah, basically it's his teachings I'm bringing into my own life. And to answer the question, and I guess to kind of wrap things up today, the always the practice, whatever it is, tantra, Buddhism, psychotherapy, earth medicine, whatever it is, philosophy, astrology, it should be always adapted to the person and never the person to the method. So like all the models, all the methods, they should always be flexible. They should always adapt to you, and you should always ask yourself, is this working for me? Like as people, as consumers of spirituality, I dare say, today we need to always be checking in with ourselves and say, what do I need? What do I want? Like, is this working for me? Is this making me happy? And one of the things that I notice a lot now is a tendency to people trying to design their life, to kind of create the ideal life that they want to have, you know? And I think this is a mistake, because I think this comes from the mind. This comes from ego. I think the idea is to do work that helps you shed away layers of your ego instead of creating more. So body, mind, and spirit, or you can say energy, mind, spirit, body, it should all come into something that makes sense in very simple way, in very simple terms. Doesn't matter what you study, what you do, what you practice, you have to be able to explain it to a child. Otherwise, it's not really working out. I think that one thing that I like to say is I always try to be good to other people, to not hurt other people, to love other people. If I can't love other people, if I notice that I'm not loving other people, I try to at least not project my neurosis and my trauma onto them to hurt them. But if I can't do this, and if I notice that I am in a negative dynamic of anger or hatred or whatever, I'm just kind of hooked with this person or situation, then I try to ask for help, professional therapy help, or so first is guide yourself by, okay, do I love this situation? Do I love this person? Am I open to them and free? If the answer is yes, then you have no problem there. No. Then if the answer is no, then ask yourself, okay, am I projecting all my crap? Am I transferring all my baggage onto them, and thus creating suffering for both of us? And then if the answer is yes, then you need help in that area. And it's nice to go to therapy with a specific thing in mind, you know? It's easy, as you know, as you did. I remember you came to therapy and you said, okay, Damian, I have this problem. Okay, easy. Let's work it.
My very direct personality in mind. And then, so what can people do, you know, just for themselves at home, as they start just to live an embodied spiritual, healthy life. Maybe there's someone who isn't quite sure what their purpose is, or they want to get into something, they want to help people, they want to be some kind of healer, but they haven't fully dove into their own shadow and trauma, but they're ready to. And so what are some things they can do just like to get started themselves? Do they start with the body? Do they start with the mind? Do they start with journaling, meditation?
Okay. So again, following the ontogamy idea, there are three things. You work with your energy, you develop your life force, your chi, your prana, which can be done through yoga, qigong, shamanic practices, all that. On the second, number two, you work with clarity, with clarifying your baggage, your identity, who you are. So you do that through any type of psychotherapeutic work, which can be done through regressions, hypnosis, body psychotherapy, chakra work, but anything that helps you clarify what's going on with you. And finally, you work with cultivating observation, your observer, so through meditation, any meditative, spiritual, contemplative practice. So again, to make it clear, you need to develop your life energy and heal your body and your energy. You need to clarify your neurosis in some sort of therapy, and you need to open and develop your observer in some sort of meditation or contemplation. And one thing I would like to say to people who are thinking of becoming a healer, choose something that resonates with you, that makes you intuitively you feel happy about, and stick with it for a while. Like, don't just try it for a few months. At least do it for a year, for a full year, before you start sharing with people. Like, it's not okay to go on a weekend workshop or on a weekend retreat and then start offering it to your clients. Really, like, there's a lot of fast food therapists nowadays, and if you really want to help someone, it takes time, takes effort, dedication. Unfortunately, it takes money and time. But if you find something that you like, just don't worry too much about what it is. If it resonates with you, try it. Try it out on yourself. Don't believe it what they say. Read the philosophy, understand the theory, but also always test it. And if it doesn't smell right, don't stay. Also, that's also important. If for any reason it doesn't resonate with your core values. Also, something you can do is find someone who's been on the path for a longer than you, and ask them for what they think. Also, what people can do is they can follow me on my social media, and I can share some stuff. No, I mean, yeah, look at people who seem serious. No, use your discernment, and like you, I know you've been traveling around looking for stuff, and the transformation you've had, Mike, over the years that I've known you is fantastic. It's like huge transformation, and really, like, the compass that has guided you is your heart, no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I made ever since having my first initial spiritual awakenings, I made the decision to follow my heart wherever that took me, and it was very challenging and painful, and I thought that meant it was supposed to be easy when you do that, but I was very wrong. But it's been an amazing journey. So yeah, share your Instagram, share the best way to reach out, and Spanish and English friendly. So where can people find you? How can people work with you? You do a bunch of stuff, dream stuff, and like qigong and all kinds of stuff. Whatever people, so just share whatever you got.
Sure. Actually, I'm putting out some new courses now online for the remainder of the year. In Spanish, but if there's enough interest in English, I'm also willing to open that up. People can find me on my website and social media. It's the same handle. It's my name, my full name, Damian Orvananos, really. Damian Orvananos, but the way you spell it is Damian Orvananos. And you guys can find me on most platforms, social media platforms. And nowadays, I'm more active on Instagram and my website as well.
All right. Well, everyone, check it out. I recommend. And Damian, thanks for being here, brother. This was fun, and I think we ought to do it again in the future. Dive into some more specific topics because this was dense and full and just right. But obviously, we could talk about so many different things. I would also like to have a chat about like psychedelics or healthy use of psychedelics and everything going on there. And a bunch of other stuff as well. So let's do it again in the future.
Mike, thanks a lot for your time. Fantastic questions. I wish you the best in this new endeavor, in this new birth of podcast that coincides with your second son. So fantastic. Congratulations on both. And talk to you soon, brother.
Thank you.